Hello, everybody.
Good evening, teacher. Good evening, good morning, teacher.
Nice. Okay, so today we will be talking about Bharu Jātaka. I believe there are very interesting themes in this Jātaka and a pretty easy misunderstanding. So I have spent extraordinary, let's say, extra time to make things clear here. So I hope that it will be understandable. And as I am now saving the presentation to be used here, I will summarize that Bharu Jātaka is an interesting, realistic situation during the Buddha's time. Something that I really like about the Buddhist teachings is that it really shows us the real thing. That means it's not just, oh, the Buddha is very powerful and everything he does works. Everything works well, and that's it. So that's exactly not the situation in Bharu Jātaka where things actually go wrong, and then they get wrong again, and then they get wrong again. In real life, oftentimes things get wrong, of course, not just three times, but they get wrong many, many more times. But I think it's an um, interesting exploration into what the Buddha did when things were definitely not going smooth. Usually, in stories, you would have a problem, and then you resolve the problem, and you're done. But here, the Buddha is using a solution and it doesn't work. Then the Buddha uses another solution and it doesn't work as well. And then the Buddha uses a third solution and that works. Perhaps the unspoken benefit that we can learn from this Jataka is to simply search for solutions again and again and again until something works, which is generally the scientific principle. Okay, so we will have a little more slides than usually, but the story is actually much simpler than usually. Still working on sharing the presentation with you. So in Bharu Jataka, as is the case with most or all Jatakas, we have four portions. These are, let's say, officially recognized four portions of Jataka stories. And Jataka means the Buddha's previous lives. So the first portion is the narrative, the story from the Buddha's time. The second portion is the narrative, the story of a Buddha's previous life. The third portion is the grammar, the explanation of the different vocabulary in the story. And then the fourth part is the Buddha's connecting of the persons in this life with the persons in the previous life. So, who in that previous life story is now born as the person today during the Buddha's time? And today, I mean 2,500 years ago. So um, we will be looking at the story from the Buddha's time, as is usually the way how Jatakas start. And during the Buddha's time, the main problem was that the Buddha's community of monks was too successful. Okay, it was too much successful. Now, too much is a negative word. Who is thinking negatively like that? Of course, the Buddha's rivals. So, rivals, somebody could say nemesis or enemies, but rivals here mean people or monks from other religions, monks who are following some other ideas. They believed something else. They believed in the God creator, or they believed that doing anything will not bring any result, so they did not believe in karma, and so on and on. So they would have different ideas. And because they had different ideas, they would therefore not be enough supported by the people in the village, by the people in the city, because the people in the city would support the Buddha's community of monks instead of the monks and instead of the ascetics from the other religions or other faiths. So these monks or these ascetics, let's call them ascetics. So these ascetics, they had a problem. Now they need to eat. They need to dress some robes on their body. They need to live in some dwellings, at least in some huts. But when they get no support or minimum support, well, then that's difficult. It's difficult to survive. So for their survival, they were thinking, so what can we now do so that we get more support from the lay people? And they got to this conclusion that perhaps the place where the Buddha stays, which is Jetavana, is the best place for the lay people to come and donate. And therefore, how about we just move to that place? Well, then we will just stay in the best place for donation, and then the lay people will just give us everything we want. So these ascetics, they were having this plan. Okay, so we will stay there where the Buddha's community of monks stays. And they also realized there is a problem. But wait, if we go there, probably the Buddha's community of monks will try to kick us away. Or maybe the king himself will not agree. So, what can we do to make sure that we get what we want? And to do that, they, these ascetics, they contacted their followers, their lay people, their donors that still they had, and they collected 100,000 pieces of money. Now, because this is a huge donation for the king, which in dollars would make no sense. Okay, like today, if you went up to the president and said, you know, I have here $100,000, and then you will do what I want, that would be laughable. You would never get anything. So that's why we need to here recount to $1 million. So let's think of it as $100 billion. And that would actually work. If you come to the President of the United States and you say, hey, I have here $100 billion and I have a tiny little request from you, that would probably work because that's what always works and it has always worked with this president. So now when these ascetics provided the king with the $100 billion, or here we say 100,000 pieces of money, then the king is asking them, oh, thank you so much for this beautiful donation. What can I do for you? And they say, well, dear king, you know, there's Jetavana, and we would really love to live there. We would like to stay there. Can you make sure that we have space And here's the key. Remember this throughout this lecture because this will be the main key word, authority. Okay. So the ascetics, they needed the authority over Jetavana. Because when they have the authority and they can then decide which monks can enter that place and which have to leave, as soon as there is a rivalry, that means as soon as it seems there's a competition between them and the Buddhist monks, then they, because they have the authority, they can make sure that they are those who get the support from the lay people and not the Buddhist monks. So they have received official decision of authority over Jetavana thanks to the bribe to the king. So what is a bribe? We will be talking about bribe throughout the time today. So bribe is when you give something so that you can corrupt the rule. Okay, so that you can break the rule. So the ascetics, they needed to break the rule. So the king's rule is that if somebody buys a land, they have the authority over the land. Now, the donors of the Buddhist monks, they bought the land of Jetavana. That's why it's called Anatha. Yes, that's why it's called Jetavana. Well, the thing is that Jetavana was bought by the Prince Jeta and it was donated, it was given to the Buddhist monks. So this is the law of that time that if you buy a land, you have the authority over the land. So the Buddhist monks had the authority of their land over the land because it was given to them. It was theirs. But the ascetics, they needed to break that rule. They needed to make sure that this land, which is not theirs, will now somehow be under their authority. So to break that rule, they gave the king the 100,000 pieces of money. And the king agreed. So the king is like, oh, well, I really need this money. This is very useful to me. And therefore, he broke the rule and he decided that the ascetics will have authority over the land and not the owners. So the ascetics started to construct their own monastery in the land of Buddhist monks, and it was a little bit noisy or a lot noisy. And because it was so noisy, the Buddha therefore asked Venerable Ananda, Ananda, what's going on? What is this noise? Then Venerable Ananda explains, "Oh Buddha, this is the construction of buildings of the ascetics who came here looking for more gain from lay people." So the Buddha realizes, oh, that will not work because if these ascetics are here, then the monks will be quarreling. The monks will be disagreeing because the Buddhist monks have the right over this land, and now these ascetics will be usurping, they will be forcing that right on themselves. They will be deciding which monks can stay here, which monks cannot stay here. They will be creating troubles and unfairness. So the Buddha decided to send some monks to speak with the king because the Buddha knew that the king is bribed. But there was a problem because the ascetics, when they gave the bribe to the king, they already made a clear pact, a contract. They made a clear contract with the king that if the Buddhist monks come to see the king and they want the land back, the king will stay silent. You see, the ascetics gave the king 100,000 pieces of money and they wanted a specific reward for that, a specific thing in compensation. And so when the monks from the Buddha visited the king ordered his servants to say that the king is not at home, which is a lie. Okay, people do that today as a normal thing. Somebody calls you, and another person picks up. Um, for example, let's say you have a husband and wife. Somebody calls the wife, and the wife is like, "Oh, I don't want to speak with this person. My dear husband, pick this up and say that I am not at home." So the husband picks it up and says, "You know what? My wife is not at home. Bye." But that's a lie. Okay, should not happen. Doesn't happen to me, so I'm free from that. But that's why it's very important if you are married or if you live with someone to always have someone who follows the five rules. So neither you break the rules, but also the other person who breaks the rules doesn't force you to break them. Okay, it's extremely important to always seek community or try to influence your community so that everybody follows the five rules. Even if you follow five rules, when the others break five rules, they will try to force you to break them for them. Okay, and if you don't break the five rules for the other person, they will punish you because you are not a good friend. But in Buddhism, you are actually a bad friend if you break rules to help someone. So we never break rules to help someone, even if they will harm us for that. No, we never break five rules, even if that means a harm to us. On the other hand, we are extremely intelligent and smart so that we follow the five rules and we never get harmed at the same time. So it's extremely important to learn to get a lot of university degrees, to read a lot of books, to have very powerful acquaintances so that whatever you want, you can do within five precepts, and nobody will ever get to force you to break them. So here the king, however, doesn't know that, and the king forces his servants to break the five precepts. And the servants therefore tell to the monks, "Oh, dear monks, the king is not at home." So the monks leave. They go back to the Buddha and say, "Oh, Buddha, we want to see the king, but he was not at home." So the Buddha then sends his two chief disciples. You see the second solution. Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana. The two chief disciples of the Buddha, Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana, go to see the king. And again, the servants say, "Oh, Venerable Sirs, the king is not at home, he's gone." So again, they come back to see the Buddha. You see the real world. In the real world, when you want to speak with someone to resolve a problem, that someone is not available. You call their phone, they don't pick it up, or they just don't exist. Or you send them an email, you get no answer within the next 3 months, or even longer. Some people answer you after 1 year, by the way. But that's still better than never. So that's the real world. Okay, you have a problem, you need to speak with someone, but they don't exist. They don't speak with you, they're not available. So now what will the Buddha do in this case? Well, the Buddha will do the Buddha way, and that is that when the Buddha does something, it's successful. So that's the funny part of it. So when the Buddha goes to see the king, then of course nobody dares to tell a lie to the Buddha, and the king actually does come out of his home, of the palace, and he listens to the Buddha. So that's where the Buddha gives the king a Dhamma teaching, and the Buddha is very clever to provide a teaching that is effective. So the Buddha tells the king a story of a past life. So in that past life, there were two groups of ascetics. And here, when I say ascetics, it doesn't mean that they're wrong, okay? You could say two groups of monks, but we will keep it as two groups of ascetics to keep it simpler. So there were two groups of ascetics, um, and one group was really staying under a certain tree, We know it as banyan tree, northern banyan tree. Banyan means is a type of a tree, so let's call it northern banyan trees to know what we talk about. So the northern banyan tree was a usual residence of one group, and this was the group of the Buddha to be. Okay, so they would always stay there every year, and then they would go to the Himalayas, to the mountains, to meditate there, and then they would come back to this northern banyan tree, and then again they would stay there, and then they would go to Himalaya. So each year they would stay there for a certain period, and certain period in the mountains, and then back, and so on and on. But there was another group of ascetics, and these ascetics somehow one day came earlier from the mountains than the Buddha to be's group. So this other group, let's call it the second group, they actually came first. They came first to the banyan tree. And then arrived the Buddha to be's group, who always stayed there. And they're like, what are you doing here? Like, this is our place. And they're like, what? Like, you weren't here. So we were first. So that's why we are here. And so the Buddha to be's group, they're like, well, we will then probably argue because we don't like you to be here because we live here and this is our place. And we don't want to stay here with people of some other group. So they went up to the king and they said, you know what, king, this is our usual place. We always stay there every year. And now somehow these other ascetics took that place. So the king liked that. The king wanted to support the Buddha to be's group. And so the king suggested that the second group will be removed. But the second group, just like the first group, had psychic powers. This is what we learn from the sub-commentary. The commentarial story doesn't explain to us where did the monks get the wheel-turning monarch's chariot, but the sub-commentary does. So what's a wheel-turning monarch? So we believe that at some times, at some periods of the world, people live not 100 years like today, but they live 200,000 years, so the lifespan is much longer, people are much happier, they're also nicer, kinder, there is peace all around the world, people love each other, they respect their parents, they follow five precepts, and everything is beautiful. So in these periods of time in the world, there is also a very special king. The king is ruling over all of the world. Now, like that today there are different countries, and each country has a different government and king or president. But during the time of the wheel-turning monarch, there is only one king for the whole world. Okay? So this one king is, however, very righteous. That means he is very just. He is very careful about each people's needs and he tries to support people with whatever they need. So the king provides people with money, with food, with things that they need. He does not keep all the wealth for himself. He is still wealthy, though, but the king is very righteous. He's very supportive. He tries to find ways how to make sure that everybody, or as many as possible, that everybody has everything they need, that there are no poor people, no poverty, no people dying of hunger, no wars, and so on. So during this period, this wheel-turning monarch, monarch means king, so this wheel-turning king or wheel-turning monarch has a full power over the whole world, and to maintain this power, he needs a very special vehicle. Some people say that this would definitely not be an ox cart. That means, a little cart that is dragged by a bull or by an ox, but probably he had some kind of like high technology vessel that would take him anywhere and that would be like super powerful, made of very special, technologically produced materials. But of course, our Buddhist scriptures do not really describe much about modern technology because then that would be the technology of that time, and then that would not be a modern technology because that's 2,500 years ago. So instead, we learn about the wheel-turning modern monarch's vehicle in the words of the time of the Buddha, and that means a chariot. A chariot is simply a vehicle that is powered by an animal. Okay, so instead of an engine, there's an animal in front, and the animal is dragging the let's say the chamber or the room in which there's the king or some rich person. Okay, so the wheel-turning monarch's chariot, however, even in the Buddha's times words, still has wheels. Okay, it has wheels and it has a frame, so we could say the skeleton of the chariot. And so these ascetics, the second group, they give the king, they make by their psychic power, they are able to salvage, they're able to rescue the previous wheel-turning monarch's chariot from the ocean. So at that time, in the Bharu kingdom, the Bharu king is rather evil, stingy, and definitely people don't live that long time, and there is a lot of evil in the world. So it's not the time of the wheel-turning monarchs period, but still it's possible to somehow save the chariot, the vehicle of the wheel-turning monarch who lived long, long, long before King Bharu. So these ascetics, they use their psychic powers to rescue the chariot of the wheel-turning monarch who's not available anymore, but his vehicle is there in the sea. So they save that from the sea or from the ocean, and they give it to the king. And the king sees, wow, this is a very precious thing. This is the chariot of the wheel-turning monarch, of the king who ruled over the whole world, something that Bharu king will never get. So, of course, he accepts that and he says, oh, venerable ascetics, what can I do for you for that? And they say, well, then give us the northern banyan tree place. And he says, yes, sirs. And that's when he approaches the Buddha to be, and he says, you're done. Bye. Go away. And the Buddha to be with his students, they of course also have psychic powers, so they save the wheels of the chariot from the ocean. And these wheels are made of jewels, they're made of gold and silver. So they take these wheels and they present them to the king, and the king is like, oh wow, that's awesome, what can I do for you, venerable sirs? And they're like, well, we want the northern banyan tree place. And he's like, yes, sure. So then he comes up to the second group and he says, you're done here, bye. And that's when the two groups see, aha, that's how the king works. If he gets something, then he doesn't care about anyone else and he just follows the instruction. So then both of the groups leave. Both the second group and the Buddha to be's group leave from the northern banyan tree. So it becomes empty. Now be careful. In Buddhism, we believe that there are deities, gods, powerful living beings that protect or that gain things from certain places. And here the deities, they were gaining the Dhamma teaching. They were gaining the inspiration in holy life life that's free from greed, hatred, ignorance by staying in the northern banyan tree place. And when they saw that all the monks are gone, then they cannot gain from the teaching. They cannot get to hear the teaching anymore. They cannot be inspired by holy, pure life anymore. So the deities were angry with the king. The deities were so angry with the king and the kingdom that you know what they did? They sent a flood into the kingdom and they killed everyone in the whole kingdom. So that is the story that the Buddha told to the king Pasenadi. Okay, hopefully you still remember the Buddha approached the king Pasenadi to explain to the king that bribes are wrong and to make sure that the rival ascetics are removed from the Jetavana because they are not supposed to have authority over that place. It's just not right. It's not just. You see, it's called injustice. And the one who will go to hell for that, first and foremost, is the king, because the king is supporting injustice. Kings are there to support justice. If injustice is all right, then the king is useless. The king's duty is to support justice. But here the king got a bribe. So the king is then breaking the rule, which results in injustice. And that's why the king would go to hell. And the kingdom would be destroyed. So the Buddha knows that. The Buddha comes to the king and shares with the king the wisdom that the Buddha has so that the king can prevent the trouble. So after the king listens to the story, the king clearly understands. I don't want to go to hell, and I don't want my kingdom to be swallowed by a flood. So the king removes the ascetics from Jetavana. He destroys whatever they built. So, on one hand, we could say, but isn't it that the Buddha actually was so like selfish that he wanted all the Jetavana for himself and he made the ascetics be removed? Well, that would actually not be correct to say. Why would it not be correct? Because the Buddha was not here really dealing with his desire for Jetavana, but the Buddha instead had the compassion for the king and the kingdom. So the Buddha, in order to save the kingdom and to save the king, went up to the king and explained to him that accepting bribes is very dangerous. The big question would be, would the Buddha do this if the ascetics did not bribe the king? Okay, if they just came up into Jetavalan, they would say, "Oh, Buddha, like we are here building our monastery. Thank you, by the way." Would the Buddha accept them? Well, that somehow did not happen, so we don't know. Okay, but what we know here is that the king did accept the bribe from the ascetics, and that indeed endangered the kingdom. A king or a president who accepts bribes is dangerous because they are no more following rules, but instead they follow the directions of the one who bribed them. Oh, yes, that is the reality. All right, so then what happened? So the king was remorseful. He was sorry. Oh, wow, look at that, what I did. I accepted a bribe and I led ascetics to come to govern, to take authority over Jetavana, which is rightfully possessed by the Buddha and the Buddhist monks. I need to do something to correct my fault. So, because the construction on the Jetavana land was unlawful, illegal, unacceptable. Yes, allowed by the king, but through the bribe, so we will have to put that aside. The king decided to actually take the materials of the ascetics used to construct their buildings. He destroyed the buildings, that's true. And he also took the materials, and be careful, materials here doesn't mean just some little sticks taken from the forest and a little bit of stones that are without any value. So in the real world, wood and stones and tools are extremely expensive. It's one of the most expensive things in a building. That's the wood, the stone, and the tools. So the king actually took these very valuable materials from the ascetics after he destroyed their buildings, and he used that to build a new monastery for the Buddhist monks. Would that be called stealing? That I don't know, but that's what happened. Well, I know that it is called stealing, but that is what happened. And oftentimes, when we see in the Jataka or Dhammapada or other stories in Buddhism where somebody suffers because people kill them, like we saw the last week, we were talking about Guttila's rival, Musik, Musila. Musila, who was killed after he disrespected his teacher. Here you see the ascetics being robbed of their materials after they tried to trick the king and the kingdom. So that is actually something we see again and people will somehow punish the bad person, but we should always remember this is not the thing that we do. It's the thing that happens to us if we are the bad person. But it's not the thing we do if we deal with the bad person. Okay? So we were talking last week about the wise person's understanding of a metaphor. Okay? And these stories are metaphorical. We need to learn from them the thing that is necessary and put aside the thing that is not necessary. So the thing that is not necessary is to kill and to steal, and the thing that is necessary is to avoid disrespect towards our teacher and to avoid encroaching or usurping another person's possession or land. Okay, so that's what the king did. We understand that's the reality. Today, what we would probably do is we would definitely not steal the materials of the ascetics, but we would probably have the ascetics to find a way how to repay for the wrongdoing that they have done. And the ascetics would then be given an option. Okay, so according to the law, you as ascetics would not be allowed to, for example, live in this kingdom ever anymore, or you can also decide to pay by your materials so that I can build a new monastery for the monks, and I will then allow you to stay in this country as well. So they would get these two choices, and if they choose to give, they could give. That would definitely be better than just stealing it from them right away. Okay, so the explanation on why the Buddha actually can tell a king a story that results in expelling monks, in expelling, sorry, not monks, in expelling ascetics, and destroying their stuff, that is explained by three layers of boundary setting. So for the younger audience here, as you get older, you will learn, especially in the US, this word of boundary. Okay, the word boundary has been misused a lot. So whenever people tell you boundary, be ready that this is probably a deception. It's a fraud. It's a way how to deceive you. So the word boundary has been used a lot to deceive, to cause troubles, to apply selfishness. So we need to be very careful about this boundary thing. It's extremely misunderstood, extremely misinterpreted. We see that everywhere. But there is also a good side of boundary. So boundary setting means that you clearly understand what are your abilities and what are your rights. All right. But the thing is with boundary is to really the part of understanding. Okay. The rights and abilities, that's all beautiful, but the understanding is also important. And that's where the boundary thing, the word boundary, gets misused because many people misunderstand about their rights and their abilities. So they will say, I have this right. This is just for me to get this much, that much, but they do not understand what actually is just, what actually is right. Okay, so that's where the word boundary gets misunderstood because boundary always comes with understanding, and the understanding part is often wrong. So it's necessary to really know the boundaries that are correct, the correct boundaries. So when somebody is setting their boundaries, they need to understand their rights, and this understanding is often wrong. So we will here expect, or we will assume that the Buddha has that understanding. Okay, only with that understanding, the word boundary is actually useful and it is not deception anymore. So we believe here that the Buddha is setting the boundaries based on a correct understanding of what he is rightfully deserving or what is actually correct. So the Buddha definitely wants to preserve his peace of mind. Okay, so the Buddha's peace of mind will never be damaged anyway, but the Buddha here is not alone. He has there a community of monks who are, many of them, still training. Okay, and when you're training, you need to have peace. And these ascetics, they came in and they created trouble. They created mental trouble. That means, oh, there are some people who believe something else, and now they're taking power over this place. And they created social trouble. That means they wanted to decide who will stay in Jetavana and who will not. So some people would simply, some monks would then be removed just because they're monks for no reason. And that's not right. So to maintain the peace, the Buddha has developed a system in the Buddha's teachings which helps us to recognize what is necessary and what is not. And this also applies for monks. So monks in the monastic community, they are actually able to suspend a monk's status. Okay, if the monk is breaking too many small rules or big rules, or if they have a serious misunderstanding. Okay, so here, is that a bad deed if monks decide that another monk is not a monk? Not necessarily. It is also possible that the other monk is breaching the boundary of virtue, of purity of the community. And when that happens, it's necessary to protect the boundary. And we always protect all boundaries within the 5 precepts. We never break the 5 precepts to protect boundaries. No, we always protect the boundaries within the 5 precepts. It's not possible. Well, then that means it's your fault because you don't know how to do it with the 5 precepts, not the other person's fault. So whenever we think, oh, I need to tell a lie so that I protect my boundary, it's not the fault of the other person or of the situation, but it's my fault because I am not enough intelligent to follow the 5 precepts and also protect the boundary. So it's on me to learn and to find ways how to actually do it right. This is extremely important. We never ever break the 5 precepts under any condition ever. Okay, so the Buddha has created Vinaya rules that help the monks create or preserve a society, a community where everyone lives as peacefully as possible, where there is understanding and where the rules are followed. And the understanding here is definitely the understanding of the Buddha's teachings, the correct understanding. Additionally, there is a law. Okay, wherever you go, there is some law. And in the Buddha's time, there was law as well in the country. So a monk is following 3 sets of rules. Okay, the rules given by the Buddha, the rules given by the king or the government, and the tradition. There's also a lot of traditional stuff. These 3 sets of rules need to be very clearly understood. For us lay people, we have only the law, the tradition, and some rules for lay people, but they're relatively easier than the rules for monks. So when there is a law, that needs to be followed. And the king needs to follow that law as well. If the king breaks the law, how can he ever then ask others to follow the law? Okay. Nowadays in the modern world, it's very rare to find a president who follows the law. It's very rare. Okay. But now we are talking about the Buddha's time. And in the Buddha's time, the idea is that the king actually can do that. Okay. Today, people will say, no, president cannot follow the law. No, nobody can follow the law, whatever. But in the Buddha's time, and according to the Buddha's teachings, it is actually not only possible, but it is necessary. If the king follows the law, then the people in the country can follow the law. Like during the wheel-turning monarch's time. Okay, the wheel-turning monarch, the king of the universe, he follows the law. And what happens? All people in that time, or most of the people at that time, also follow the law. Wow, it works. It worked, and it will work. So it's very important that the king follows the law. So when there is a very clear breach, very clear breaking of the rule or of the law in the kingdom, then the Buddha and the monks are absolutely most encouraged, if they get the chance, to speak with the king, to speak with the government, and help them understand that following law is very good for the whole country. So here in our story, the king broke the law. He accepted a bribe, and he did not follow the rules of the kingdom. That means the person who is the owner of the land has the authority of the land. The king decided that some totally unrelated ascetics will be coming in the land and have authority over it. What? Totally useless, nonsensical. And therefore, the Buddha was very right to tell the king, dear king, this is wrong. Okay, so here we have a little bit about Vinaya. We have last 2 slides. We're going to finish soon. So we have here a little bit about the rules. That's from the subcommentaries. The subcommentaries explain to us that monks actually can stay in the places of other ascetics, but they need to take permission. Okay, so just like it's expected from the ascetics to come to Jetavana and say, "Oh, venerable sirs, can I actually stay in your place?" And the monks would say, "No." And then the ascetic would go. So, in the same way, the monks are supposed to come to the place where the ascetics stay and say, "Oh, dear friends, can I stay in your place?" And they say, "No." And the monk will go. You see, it's called justice, righteousness. And when there is a righteousness like that, it's much easier to survive. So the monks have the role that if the place is a very temporary place of some ascetics, they can come in without permission because nobody really cares. But if that's a place where the ascetics really care about, like their permanent residence, the monks must ask for permission. And then only if they get it, they can stay there. And then we have a little bit of vocabulary here. I was talking about that vocabulary a little bit within the last 15 minutes, but let's review. So we have here an interesting word, lanjang in Pali. And this word lanjang, and this word lanjang means basically a sweetener. So what it means is when you are bribing, when you give someone else money or things so that they now will follow your directions as they break rules for you, you are basically giving them honey. You are pouring honey over their hand, and through that honey on their hand, you will now be able to direct the hand to control what you want. Let's say that you have a friend and your friend steals something. Okay, for example, let's say your friend sees somebody's pen. It's so beautiful, I will steal it. And your friend steals the pen, and you see that. And then your friend will say, you know what? I will give you here my electric car that you always wanted. And therefore, you will never tell anyone that you saw me steal the pen. Ah, there we go. You are bribed. As soon as somebody asks you, did you see somebody stealing the pen? Then you will have to answer, no, because you're bribed. You received the electric car, right? So now you cannot say yes, because that seems to be unfair. You received something, so now you need to do something in return. So that's what's called bribe. In bribe, we are a little bit stealing the authority over the law. So these are, we could say, the adult games. Okay, so these are the games that adults play in the real world. That's the way also how you destroy the natural law. So we have here another word, chanda gamanang. Chanda gamanang is actually a pretty simple word. Chanda means desire. Agamanang means arrival. So arrival through desire or um, becoming desirous. But here in this context, it actually means to be biased. So now the king is no more righteous. He is no more thinking, so who's the owner? That owner will have authority. Now he is thinking about who is giving me something so that I give them authority. So here the king is the victim of Chanda Gamana. He's the victim of going to bias. And that bias corrupts. Corrupt means to break. It breaks, it causes a hole in the rule, in the law. And that hole is caused by desire. You see, the king desires the money by delusion. The king doesn't know that lack of righteousness can lead to the destruction of the country. The hatred, which is there from the ascetics, they hate the Buddhist monks. They're like, what are they doing there? They're stealing our what we deserve. We want to get food and robes and place to stay. Now they're getting it. They're hate. Uh, they're angry, and fear. Now the king is afraid. If I do not follow the directions of these ascetics, well then I am not getting this money. I need to follow their directions so that I get the money. And then we have here rather less essential, we could say, this is less of practice, but more of language. The word agga can be understood as portion, excellence, or first. So we had this Pali word agga in the beginning of the story. When we were talking about the Buddhist monks getting really uh, the highest portion or the greatest excellence or being the first to gain, to receive the donations from the lay people. And here, most importantly, the meaning was that they were the first to get the donations. And now we are at the end of the lecture, and we still have 3 minutes. So I am wondering if anyone here has any question. Nice. No question. I will again share with you the links to this recording and to the presentation and a little summary of what we were talking about. And I hope to see you all again next week. We will be looking at 2 Jatakas at the same time because I believe they are short and we can do that within that 1 hour. And I hope that you will be enjoying the rest of the weekend. I wish you to be happy, to be healthy, and to be successful in everything you do.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Sia.